Alright. So, this is a run of 1 PMC, which is a category in Gauntlet 7 Sorrows that has a lot of unique and interesting traits to it. So 1 PMC stands for One Player Multi-Controller, and it's a category we built around the idea that this is a multiplayer game, so in theory you can play with 4 controllers. It kind of fundamentally breaks the game in a lot of ways, in a lot of really fun ways. And so it's a very exciting category with a lot of really cool tricks. And some of them are quite difficult to do, but through a lot of different research and setups that we've been able to find, we've made a lot of it pretty consistent. So in this run, we're going to use up to 4 controllers at a time, and by doing that, we're going to be able to break the game in a lot of really cool ways. So I'm going to start here. I have my splits open, and they are comparing against my my average. So 4130 is my average. I think the current record is at a 39 something. It's like a 3930, which is a run that I got just a couple of days ago. And this run tends to average just a little above 40 minutes for me. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get this started. I'm gonna start by picking Elf. We pick Elf for one very, very specific reason, and that is a move that he can unlock called Continental Assault. It's incredibly high damaging, seemingly in an unintended way. It's sort of this spread arrow shot where he shoots these 3 arrows in a spread, and if you hit something with all 3 arrows, it starts doing incredibly high damage. So at the beginning of this run, we're going to be gathering up gold so that we can buy Continental Assault. And I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the history here, because there's a very interesting history for this game. I'm also going to be doing a little bit of a safety route where I pick up some extra gold just to add some contingency plans in case I miss anything. So Gauntlet 7 Sorrows came out in 2005. It's a sequel to Gauntlet Dark Legacy, and it was kind of just a big flop. Midway rushed the production of this game to try and get it out as quickly as possible, and because of that, a ton of content got cut, and a lot of the mechanics they planned for this game never made it in, and it led a lot of Gauntlet fans to be disappointed. So thanks to that disappointment, this game got largely overlooked, and sort of led to the downfall of the Gauntlet series as a whole. But in a weird sort of silver lining way, because this game was such a letdown, it has opened the doors for really interesting speedruns. So what you just saw was pretty standard stuff for this game. I have walked to the end of a level. I didn't really stop to fight anything. I picked up a little gold, and then I finished. I did also save my character. That's going to be important later, that we have our character saved. That's how the game is normally played. That's what people were doing all the way until just a few months ago. I am about to not do that anymore. It's actually quite rare in this run that we just play the game like normal. So what you see around the edge of the screen where it says join and load, those are for the other players. And there's some really cool things like this that we can do because of that. So what I've just done is I added another player to play co-op, right? But when you spawn a player in, it spawns them on top of your current player. And by doing this, when you're standing at like a wall that you're supposed to do some sort of objective to clear, sometimes you can just walk over top of the wall. And that's sort of a core tenet to this run. We're gonna be stepping on top of other characters' heads a lot in order to... I'm gonna take a little damage on purpose here. In order to break the game and skip things that we're not normally supposed to skip. So here in this level, we're going to grab a key, and I'm actually going to die to take a little death warp so that we can save some time, not have to walk as far. Grabbing keys and another mechanic we'll see a little later, and we kind of saw in the beginning, pushing stones. Those are like the 2 biggest mechanics in this game. They really didn't manage to get a lot in as far as objectives go. So keys are big, pushing stuff is big, the rest is not. So I'm going to abuse my second player again one more time, and I'm going to drop him in right here, and you'll see at the bottom it says bonus gold. So So what that means is I have just gathered an extra 100 gold because technically my elf character performed the best that level, because the other one didn't even exist for most of the level. So he gets a bonus gold of 100 gold as like a multiplayer bonus. That's a mechanic we can abuse to just get extra gold whenever we want. So I can drop that player out now, I don't need them. This is another one of those levels where we have only a few little, like kind of one little multi-controller trick, but the rest of this level is pretty straightforward. This one's called Plague Town, and it's kind of an interesting one because it's the very first boss in the run. And as with many speedrunners, as cool as bosses can be, we don't really want to have to fight them. It's just going to take time to finish him off and go through the whole rigmarole of the fight, so we're actually going to try and skip the entire thing. I am going to use one of the first actual glitches that we found that we can utilize to sort of break this game in order to skip this boss. So first I have to get there. In order to get there, I need to clear a chunk of enemies. We have to defeat the hordes to find the key. Once again, a key. That's kind of just how it always is. We're going to defeat the hordes to find a key. And by adding a second character here, I'm actually increasing the enemy spawn rate. So enemies will spawn based on how many players you have playing at the time, and technically I'm playing with 2 players. So I'm using some spells to help me gather the enemies a little easier, and I'm going to be just kind of bouncing my hands between the 2 controllers in order to get as much value out of my characters as possible, and this will let me finish this section a little bit faster. So the wizard just picked that key up, so now we can go fight the Scarecrow boss. It's not going to be much of a fight, though. So I entered this boss fight facing a very specific direction. And now I'm actually holding a specific direction on my joystick, on my controller. Once this cutscene ends, I'm going to move a little bit of distance, and then I'll be standing in the perfect spot. As long as I clear a prompt and hit my attack button with the right timing, I can instantly kill Scarecrow with a glitch that causes him to melt into the floor. So I'm going to mentally count out 180 beats per minute. I have a bit of an advantage, I'm a musician, I can do that in my head. Usually you can use a metronome as well, but there we go. So he's now gonna melt into the floor, and as he sinks down, we believe he's probably hitting like a death box. You know, like a lot of games out of bounds will have like a spot where they say you've gone too far, you're gonna die now. We think that's happening with the boss. He hits an invalid point, he gets removed, his health, his like existence is removed by the game, and we get to skip this boss fight. So that was I think that was the first glitch we ever found. I actually found that while practicing the boss fight to try and get better at the runs. I accidentally did that one time and realized, oh, we might not have to fight this guy, which sparked an absolute renaissance in this game where it was being completely broken. Now we've already seen the results of some of that. We saw earlier I climbed over those guards using multiple controllers. That kind of trick, which we typically call co-op laddering, because we can climb over things using the co-op mechanics, that is something that a runner named Blue Screen found. Blue Screen has really been the key innovator in particularly this category, but this game as a whole in general. He has found a ton of really cool stuff. So what you just saw, I went through some screens there. I actually bought a new spell, a new ability called Continental Assault, the one I mentioned earlier. By that point, we've gotten enough gold, so it costs 500. We actually had a little bit extra because I picked up a little extra just to make sure. And now I have a move called Continental Assault. This is the strongest move in the game, and it was one of the first big discoveries as far as speedrunning Gauntlet 7 Sorrows goes. Long before our current brigade of runners were prevalent on the leaderboards, there was a runner named Pote who had the world record for a very long time. And back in 2016, he realized that the elf is the best character. And he's the best character because he has the move that I just used to kill an enemy generator. It's called Continental Assault, and it does a massive amount of damage to anything that you can stand directly in front of. So that's one of the key tools that allows us to do things like boss fights really quickly when we aren't able to completely circumvent them like the Scarecrow. We used to have to get that move much later in the run, but we've kind of restructured the gold route in order to get it much earlier so that we can get more advantage out of it. So now we have a bit of a walking section, a bit of a break in the run where we can take a breather. There's a couple moments during these runs where we just have to cover some distance on foot, and so it gives a second to just like calm down, take a breath, prepare for the next following sections. What we're actually approaching after this level and the next level is a string of levels that are kind of the most difficult part of the run. A sort of a gauntlet within gauntlet, if you will. So now, some typical gauntlet things. We need to destroy generators in order to move on. I'm actually going to do a nice little trick at the end of this. It's going to allow me to skip a cutscene. So I'm going to do some of the damage to this generator. I'm going to back up. I'm going to do the rest of it. And because I'm standing directly on top of where the end portal spawns, I was able to skip the end of the level because it already considered my character at the end. I didn't have to wait for that cutscene to finish. So that's one of the 2 little cutscene skips we've been able to find. Those are actually very recent discoveries. We found those on stream. Me and Blue Screen were messing around looking into some stuff, and we were able to find that. So now we are in a very interestingly warped and evolved level. This used to be called the money level because of just how much money is on this level. So many of these chests that I'm walking by have tons of money. And I'm actually going to do something fun here.
Death has a beard.
Death has a beard. So we've seen Death a couple times this run. Death is a core mechanic in this game. He appears in certain chests, and we kind of are, we're all big fans of him, so I like to summon him when I can. So what I'm doing here might look a little funny, right? What just happened? So we're going to continental this real quick. I did a much more advanced version of that co-op laddering that allowed me to climb over top of something. So because the collision on that rubble is curved, if I keep running towards it and spawning new characters in, I can climb all the way over it and skip almost that entire level. So that's why that's no longer the money level, because we don't even have to play it. We can just go right to the end. That was a huge innovation. So here we're going to be hitting what used to be one of the longest levels in the run and has become one of the shortest and most fun levels to me. So Ancient Forest is where we fight a boss called the Twisted Man, and he happens to be a large humanoid tree. And because he's a large humanoid tree, we all kind of just call him Groot. So we're going to go fight Groot. In order to get there, we have to open some doors. And so instead of clearing all of the enemies out, I'm actually just going to use 2 characters at the same time. So I have one hand on each controller. And I'm going to use one hand to crank the lever, and the other hand is going to attack enemies and just keep the elf safe. So we've made it through those doors. Normally there's a lot more doors to make it through, but luckily we're going to skip that. So I mentioned 4 controllers, and so far I've used 2. So where do these other controllers come and play? Well, let's add one more in. We are going to skip this wall, but it's too high. So let's use 2 characters instead of 1. There's a couple reasons why we can't use typical co-op laddering for that. It has to do a sticky collision, which we'll get into a little bit later. But by stacking multiple characters, we can just pop right over the top. So now I'm going to use a pretty advanced technique. This is sort of like a co-op boss fight that I'm going to be doing in order to get extra damage, as well as help manipulate the RNG of this boss to use specific attacks. So Valkyrie kind of essentially is tanking the fight for us, and now I'm going to try and finish him off with Elf. Elf is providing most of the damage here. And once again, we actually stood Valkyrie on top of where the end portal spawns, so I was able to completely skip the end of that cutscene there. That saves like 15 to 20 seconds. It's a very long cutscene that we get to skip. So that's kind of an advanced technique because it's difficult to properly control both characters for that fight at the same time. But with lots of practice, we've been able to do that. This is another very interesting and storied level. This is a level called Standing Stones. You just saw me skip over the first of the standing stones. Normally we have to push a lot of stones on this level. and it takes a long time, and it's extra hard because there's so many enemies. So what I'm actually going to be doing is using a lot of co-op tricks to circumvent most of this. So let's actually do a quick slam here, and then we can get this going. So what I'm doing here is a trick called co-op laddering again. This is one of the first sort of really difficult and advanced versions of this, and it abuses something called sticky collision. So for some reason, when there's these walls that we want to get over, there's a chance that as long as we keep running towards the wall, we won't fall down. And we call that sticky collision. And what this allows us to do, I gotta fix my angle just a little bit here. It allows us to infinitely climb stuff that we normally can't climb. And that lets us skip massive portions of this game. So I have to hold my hands in very precarious positions in order to do this. But once we've done it, we have completely skipped the first portion of this level. Now, unfortunately, we can't co-op ladder over this next big rock that we need to fall. So we're just going to use a wizard to defend our warrior while the warrior pushes these stones. So this is, again, one of those moments where, while we are using some sort of interesting and advanced multi-controller techniques where we have to kind of properly control multiple characters at once, it's not too hard, and it does let us take a little bit of a breather in the run and say, okay, we have a minute. So there we go. We've pushed those rocks. We're actually about to walk up to another section of the level where we're supposed to do the same thing, but I don't want to. This level actually irked me a lot. I really hated doing it normally because there's just so many enemies and it's so difficult. So I came up with pretty much all of the strats that we use here in order to skip a lot of this. And a lot of those strats are using techniques that Blue Screen discovered. Things like co-op laddering and something we're going to see a little bit later in the run. So here, as we walk around this sort of long curved path, we start entering into what we call Standing Stones Part 2, which is normally a very, very difficult part of the run. You can see there are actually a ton of stones that we have to push. So I don't want to do that, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to run right up into this corner, and I'm actually going to be able to co-op ladder up this rock. So let's zoom my camera back in a little bit. And we're going to try and climb a little quickly so that we get away from the enemies. Okay, we're pretty safe now. I can take it a little slower. So I'm about to use a very interesting trick. I'm going to be making new characters in mid-air. I'm going to be kind of swapping them, and this is a trick that we call swap floating. This allows us to do something that we don't normally need to do, which is cover a big distance. So I want to get over to the end portal, but it's too far, and I can't jump in this game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare another character. I'm going to get my hands in a very precarious position in order to do this. Try and get my controller to play nice. We want it to be a warrior. And then I'm going to dash with Valkyrie and press a button on warrior to pull him in. And that is absolutely the hardest trick we have in the run. But through lots of setups, we're able to make it consistent. By dropping in an extra character during that dashing over the gap, I was able to completely skip the longest portion of that level. I usually refer to that as the stone skip. One of the bigger innovations that we made, it was originally incredibly hard to do. Swap floating was the hardest trick in the run by far. And it's still the hardest thing to do, but the strat of using Valkyrie's really quick dash move in order to cover distance faster so that we don't have to do as many of the other difficult tricks in the air as we used to, makes it much more consistent and easy. So still difficult, but very doable. And luckily, as with a lot of these tricks, if we fail them and die, we actually respawn pretty much right before we do it. So we can just try it again, and it only loses a little bit of time. So now we're seeing the next boss. This is the third boss in the run. And he's made of rocks. He's a big stone golem. Sometimes we call him the Rock Man. I would love to just fight him and finish him off, but he doesn't actually take damage. Instead, he's controlled by all these summoners on top of these stones, these like stone pillars. So instead, I'm going to get him to attack all of these stones to knock them down so that we can take out these summoners. This used to be a big, difficult point in the run because it's really hard to get the behavior you want out of both the Stone Golem and the Summoners, but we've actually found some techniques that help a lot. For one, I'm hitting him using one of Wizard's spells, and that forces him to do a stomp attack. This makes his behavior a little bit more consistent. And now that we have taken out all of the pillars, I'm going to pull all of these Summoners as far away from him as I can. So I'm going to go just until he turns around. And now we're going to come back, and I'm going to try to gather all these Summoners up. And it looks like we have one that's not playing nice, so we won't get this quite perfectly, but it'll still be pretty good. We used our Mana Burst. So the Mana Burst is that big whoosh move that I just used. That pushes enemies, and there's a pit in the center. And by pushing them into the pit, I'm able to instantly kill them. So I'm just going to uppercut that last one into the pit with the spell, and there we go, we've killed the Stone Golem. That used to be a lot harder to do, but we've got some good setups now that let us do it much cleaner. And that's one of the unique uses for Wizard. So we're kind of seeing that not only are we using 4 controllers, we're using all 4 characters too. The Valkyrie helps us tank the Twisted Man fight. Wizard helps us for the Stone Golem fight, and he also helps defend our characters when they're doing things. Warrior, kind of helpful considering he's the default character, so he's who we ladder with typically. And then Elf is useful because he has the highest damage. So every character has their own little use throughout this round, which is really cool. So now, I don't want people to be too disappointed. We've only used 3 controllers. So let's do some exciting things. Let's actually start using... let's get you back up there. We're going to co-op ladder over this real quick. But then we're going to start using 4 controllers. So let's pull in player 1 again, because we need to start as player 1 because of some of the specifics with this trick. And I want to skip. I want to cover over some more of these blue walls that we keep jumping over. But these ones aren't sticky. And it has to be sticky for us to co-op ladder over it. So instead, I'm going to do this. I'm going to summon 4 characters all at once using some very tricky hand positions. And that's going to let me skip over these tall walls that we normally can't quite get over. We're going to do this 2 more times because there's 2 more walls. And this just saves a ton of time on fighting enemies. So let's do this one more time. That skips that one. There we go. And now we just have to do this one more time. And then we've finished what was typically one of the more difficult levels because of how many enemies we had to kill. We just kind of skipped the whole thing. So, and there we go. So I'm going to try to drop out all my characters before hitting the portal, which will just make this a little easier for me entering the next level. So there we go. That's Imperial City. That used to be such a thorn in our side because of how difficult the level was. And now, because of these 4-player skips we found, we can just go right past it. Those were all skips that were found by Blue Screen, and I was able to find the proper hand positions that allow us to do it in RTA runs consistently. So, now we're back to one of the few levels where, despite having some multi-controller skips, a lot of it is done pretty normally, and that's because these rooms are just so disjoint. So, we destroyed a generator to hit a lever, now we're going to do that a couple more times. So again, another point in the run where we have a little bit of a breather. In a marathon, this would be these are great times to maybe read a donation or 2 because we really just need to kill a couple things so that we can get to the next section. So there's 3 of the levers. We just got 1 more lever to pull. And once we do that, we can now get a teleporter to spawn so that we can move to the next section. This has been such an incredible few months for this game. Just a few months ago, none of this was known. None of this was possible. All the speedrunners for this game were just playing the game normally. They would just kind of run through the levels, using Continental Assault because it was kind of a strong move, and trying to get to the end of the game. And because of this, the game has stagnated for years. I mean, the previous record up until early this year was at 1 hour, 1 minute. Here, I'm just going to do a real quick swap on my characters so that I have my mana back. And that's just so that I can do this a little bit safer because I want to burst before doing this. We're going to climb over some stuff. This is, again, classic Seven Sorrows tricks where we're just going to climb over things with our characters instead of actually engaging with the mechanics. So, yeah, typically the game was run just like normal. But we found all these really cool uses for these multiplayer, these multi-controller advantages we can get that has completely transformed this run. So we went from being over an hour on the runs to the record being under 40 minutes. It's an incredible sort of transition that we've seen through things. And a lot of that is because just a right group of people came together for this game at the right time. Alright, so now we're going to hit the end of this level, and it's normally kind of a weird room. We got to crank a lever, wait for this door to open, but for some reason this door is a lot shorter than it looks. So I'm actually just going to position here and push my way through the door with another character. And we can skip that too. Lots and lots of things that we just don't really have to do because of all these controllers that we can use. So now we're entering a level called Throne Room. Throne Room is a little infamous, even still. A lot of the other infamous levels we've been able to kind of solve using multi-controller stuff. And even in the standard new game any %, where we use one controller, we've found some things, but Throne Room is hard. So we luckily do get to co-op ladder. This is the longest instance of co-op laddering, where we are going to climb up this wall, and it's actually going to take quite a while. This allows us to skip like an entire boss fight. We have to fight these giant statues normally, and this is much faster than doing that. But the real difficult part is the boss at the end of this level. So at the end of this level, we have to fight the Grand Magistrate. And I kind of mentioned earlier that this game had a real difficult development cycle where a lot of things got cut. And it does feel like this boss fight suffered from that. In this boss fight, we typically... in any boss fight, we typically are looking for abilities that we can like counter hit, or maybe a way we can abuse the boss's RNG or AI by using multiple characters. But I'm just gonna run the warrior over there. My elf's gonna be a little low on health, but that's okay. But this boss, we just can't do that with them. They counter hits don't seem to work on them almost ever, so we can't stun the boss like we do with some of the later bosses. And he has so many AoE moves that using a second character to try to like distract him or something doesn't really help. So we're just gonna have to go in and fight him, and it's the biggest RNG check for the run. You can't really lose all that much time because you are going to be doing damage to him, and as long as you're doing damage, like you're making progress towards that end goal. But he can make us lose, you know, 15, 20 seconds or more just by giving us a bad moveset. So the fireballs that we're seeing, that's actually exactly what we want. The lightning bolt's not too bad either. It's these other big AoE moves that we want to avoid, and we actually got incredible RNG against him. Normally that could take another 10 to 15 seconds just to, if he does these ice moves or these big pillars of fire that waste a lot of time by knocking us down. So that was a pretty good Grand Magistrate fight. Always great to see. It is kind of it's becoming a bit of a meme that I just have incredible Grand Magistrate luck, and the other runners struggle against him a lot more. I don't know what it is. We've contemplated the idea of having cursed copies of the game. So maybe I have a blessed copy, but now we're gonna go back to one of the two major mechanics, which is pushing something. It's either pushing something or picking up a key in this game usually. So we're going to push something, we'll drop down a hole, that ends the level. That's Grand Magistrate, that's the Throne Room. Very cool level with some of the skips that we found, but definitely difficult to have such an RNG check right in the middle of the run. So now we're going to move on to Imperial Dungeon. This is another one of my favorite levels because we get to do a really fun trick. We are once again going to have to clear a bunch of enemies in order to move forward in the level. And when we do that, we like to increase spawn rates. So I'm going to add an extra character so that I have a higher spawn rate for enemies, and I can finish that section faster. But I'm also going to be using a little bit of a strategy where I can use a spell that Wizard uses, or that Wizard has, in order to group the enemies up for me. So let's get our Wizard ready, and let's get into position in this corner. This corner is kind of just my preferred place to do it. Let's use Wizard to attack these guys a little bit, and then I'm going to try to pull enemies together. So this is a little difficult because Wizard sometimes gets bullied, and so we're going to try and kill these enemies down by Wizard. So I'm kind of fighting with two characters right now, which is difficult to do, but I have a lot of practice doing it. And so now we are kind of set up to just keep this loop going. I am just going to keep smacking these enemies and pulling them together and smacking them. It just makes this section so much easier and faster because we have more enemies spawning, and it's very easy for Elf to have access to them because Wizard's pulling them to the center. Every time we do this, Wizard steps forward a little bit. Not a big deal. Already, that path is clear. I'm going to pick up this cheese for health, and we're going to run towards the end of this level. So, getting through that portion faster is great, but once again, this is Gauntlet 7 Sorrows. Of course, we still have to pick up a key, use a little teleporter, all kinds of just classic things. It's very likely I will take a death here too, because it's hard to survive this whole section. But that's okay, because all the spawn points in this game are very close to each other. So dying typically doesn't cause a big issue in any point in the run. There's a couple reset points if you die, but they're reset points because it loses like 20 seconds, which is just frustrating. They're actually not that big of a run killer. So we'll see if we can survive this onslaught of arrows. We might get lucky. It looks like we might be able to do it. Hopefully we don't touch the fire. Awesome. And that was actually the fastest I've ever done that level. That went very well. Usually that can be a couple seconds slower. So now we're going to move on to Dungeon Deeps. Dungeon Deeps is kind of a long level where we don't have a ton of multi-controller stuff. We do get to do some fun stuff a little later in the level, but a lot of this is just getting some doors to open by pulling levers. So another break in the run where we can kind of breathe and say, okay, you know, we're good, we're safe. If, you know, a lot of times I'll sit and read chat during this level because I really just got to run through some things. But there's a little bit to talk about. So once again, we get to have a fantastic Death has a beard moment. So the announcer says Death has appeared, but if you listen, it sounds like beard.
Death has a beard.
And so a lot of us joke around and talk about Death's beard all the time. And when we're doing runs, sometimes we'll all kind of like, every time Death's chest gets open, we all go, Death has a beard. So it's very funny. Sometimes if we finish off Death by using Mana Burst, we'll say like, oh, I guess Death must have shaved, doesn't have a beard anymore. I summon Death for a specific reason here, and that's because I need to take a Death Warp. So I need to be a little careful here. Ooh, we are actually going to take an extra Death. That's okay. Again, this actually is a great way to show that's about as bad as a death can be, and I'm just a couple seconds away, you know, I could just run back up here. This section can be a little risky because we intentionally spawn the hardest enemies possible in order to take this Death Warp. So I've taken a lot of damage, but that's actually good because we now need to go back to where we just came from, and we don't really like to actually have to backtrack. I don't want to have to walk all the way, so we'll just take a little Death Warp, take that spawn point that is close to where I need to go next. And because this lever is also in the opposite direction of where I need to go next, we're going to do it again. We're going to take a second Death Warp. I don't have actual death with me here, but these guys with the shields actually do a lot of damage. So if we can just get them to hit us a couple times, saves us a little time in walking. And there we go. So nice little Death Warps that we get to take. And now we're coming up on a section that used to be very frustrating for us. Which, again, might be a theme that you're noticing. A lot of these sections used to be very frustrating, but they're not anymore. So there's a gate that opens after we kill these two tall blue guys. And it used to bug out all the time and it wouldn't open. And we didn't know why. But we have solved the mystery. The enemies that you're seeing spawn in the back of the room, if they're not spawning, it's because there's too many other enemies in the level. And if that has happened, they won't, the gates like trigger just breaks and it won't open for like an extra 30 to 40 seconds. So I bursted before going in that room, and that keeps that from happening and make sure there's not too many enemies in the game. So now, this is one of my favorite tricks. I'm just gonna hold R1, which is the button for Mana Burst, and now every time I summon a new warrior in as a player, they immediately Mana Burst. And so I'm just gonna keep doing this until all 9 of these generators that we normally have to walk around and destroy are gone. So it's just a fun little trick that we get to do. It saves a couple of seconds, probably 10 seconds there, over how long it can take to sit there and actually kill all those generators. So a pretty useful little trick that we can use. And again, another little walking portion, some time to read chat, if we ever wanted to, because we just got to make our way now to the end of the level. And at the end of the level here, we are going to face the second to last boss of the game. So we're actually hitting this sort of latter portion of the run. And this is where the troll fight is. And he's very aptly named because he has the capacity to really troll us by giving us bad movesets that waste our time. But some of the runners have gotten together and really studied this boss fight to see how we can approach it best. So I am going to be using some strats here. First, I'm going to pick up this weapon upgrade at the back of the room. Lets me do some more damage. And then now I'm going to be looking for specific attacks. And I'm hoping he does... Oh, the fire is going to kill me, so let's respawn. We're luckily just right below him, so that helps. So this is a good move because this is going to be followed by a roar. The one move we don't want is the big tennis swing. And that's also going the overhead swing's good because that lets me counterattack him, which lets me stun him. So now he's going to push me back. He's going to slam again, and he pushed me away, so we're going to have to get back up to him. Backhanded swing, that's a good one because we can block it. And then he's going to do the overhead swing again so we can finish him off here. We've learned a lot about that fight and how to handle it properly. It used to be a very difficult one. But now there's really only one move he can do that messes with us, and sometimes he'll do it a bunch, but again, like a lot of things in this run, at worst you're just going to lose, 10, 20 seconds by having that go poorly. So we lost like 15 seconds there. Like that level had multiple things go wrong, and we still don't lose very much time. So it is kind of nice that Seven Sorrows runs do feel like they're very recoverable, because in some moments you can lose 10-15 seconds, but in the same way there's some levels where you can suddenly save a ton of time if things go well. So now we're hitting these last couple levels, and the two that we're about to play used to be some of the longest levels in the run. There's a lot that you have to do. There's a ton of objectives you need to clear, but we have found some awesome and fortunate ways to skip almost these entire 2 levels. So normally I have to take these 3 different teleporters to pull 3 different levers. That lowers these different bridges and eventually lets me leave the level. Instead, I don't want to lower this bridge. I'm just going to raise my character by co-op laddering. So we have to say goodbye to our fancy sword since we don't have the sword saved, but we don't really need it anymore. And I'm just going to co-op ladder my way up onto this bridge, and once we are over the bridge, we're going to do one more little trick where they forgot to make a wall above this balcony, and so if we do this right, we can just... Okay, let's actually burst real quick. The enemies keep hitting me off. We can walk right over the edge. And that skips basically the entire level. So that's an awesome skip that we found. It's actually very easy to do too. Lets us just pop right down here right at the end. So now I only have to do one of the keys and one of the levers, which is the one that makes the end portal spawn. So we're just going to destroy these generators using a mixture of our different spells for different reasons. The Continental keeps the enemies away, and the Slam is dealing good damage to the generators since there's multiple generators to destroy. And now we can run down into this special room that we normally see a lot in this level, but here we only see it once. So that we can pull this final lever. Which lever is active and allowed to be pulled is based on which teleporter we came in through. So because we used the final teleporter, we don't have to do the other levers. So I could run back up and teleport back, but that takes time. So we're actually just going to die because there's a spawn point at the top. And boom, save a couple seconds, don't have to walk up. So now we just need to clear a couple things, clear some generators, and that opens up the end of the level. So we skipped almost that entire level. It's an incredible find that those were other skips that Blue Screen found. Blue Screen has found a lot of these strategies. He is our resident innovator for the Seven Sorrows categories, both 1PMC and our new game Any Percent, where we use one controller. So we were able to drop down to skip that whole level. This one, I'm going to pop up to skip this level. So normally with co-op laddering, we're climbing on our characters, right? There's actually this weird quirk with spawning characters where sometimes if you're standing under something, the character you spawn spawns on top of the thing instead of the character. And so that lets us go on top of this balcony by standing on that chest, and this walkway just so happens to be right around the end of the level. There's usually all these crystals that we have to activate, and it opens up these doors, or these like blue walls that disappear. But in this case, we just have to do the final set, just like last time. So I'm just gonna quickly run around here. We're gonna activate these crystals, and that's gonna give us the end portal. Now, the end portal actually never shows up. It's a little glitch where that end portal is supposed to show once all of the crystals have been activated, but it still actually functions even though it's not visually there. So we're just going to walk into nothing and, oop, level's done. So here we are at Caldera. Caldera is the final boss fight. Caldera is a little bit of a disappointing boss for the casual Gauntlet fan. You don't actually even get to fight him. He's this giant demon, he looks really cool, but he's in this big pit of lava, so instead of actually fighting him, we're just gonna shoot ballistas at him. And that entails us just kind of pulling some levers. So a lot of people, when they got this game for Christmas and in 2005, 2006, probably were kind of bummed to get to the end and go, man, that wasn't really much of a final boss. But once again, we get a nice little speedrunner's silver lining. Because it's kind of a simple boss fight that doesn't require a lot of difficult fighting or involve much risk, we actually get to kind of take a breather at the end of our runs. We get to say, okay, we can chill out, we can calm down, let's just pull these final levers. It's a very relaxed ending. It's actually great because a lot of times what we'll end up doing is at the end of the run, we'll start looking at chat, and whoever's in chat will start making predictions on when the run's going to end exactly, because we know about how long this level takes. It's about 3 minutes. So a lot of us like to sit there and go like, oh, what do you think? I think it's going to be a 43-23. Oh, I think... And it's a really fun little thing we get to do because we have this extra time and breathing room. There's a couple little tricks we're doing. I'm trying to keep a lot of the enemies alive right now, because if I get enough of them spawned and then get them to get stuck on a specific island, I can actually prevent some enemy spawns later on in the level, which is cool. And then should that fail, we have a contingency for 1PMC where we actually use a second character, again, a wizard, in order to protect the warrior. And that's because, unfortunately, since a lot of the development cycle was shortened for this game, so many mechanics were missing that it seemed like for this boss fight, they just kind of copy and pasted a lot of old mechanics. And so we're pulling levers and we're shooting ballistas, which is what we saw in the previous levels. And then they bring back the stones again. So for some reason, we need to push stones, and pushing stones is going to magically activate a teleporter. I don't know if they got magnets in those stones or if it's some kind of weird Minecraft redstone thing or what. But, we're gonna have to push some stones, and pushing stones can be kind of difficult with enemies around, so we're gonna hope that we got the glitch that allows us to stop spawning enemies. There's gonna be a couple that are scripted to always spawn, but once they've spawned, we'll see if they keep spawning. And I'm thinking that they are. It looks like they are, so I'm actually going to give myself an extra character and then defend them with Wizard. And if they do end up stopping their spawns, which it kind of looks like they are, I can actually finish this off with Wizard. Let's see if Wizard dies. That allows us to... One of these is not pushed all the way. There we go. Might take a death here because we are quite low on health. But that's okay because there's a spawn point right at the end. And it's looking like we're going to get a pretty solid 42. So, great run to get. Pretty close to my average. And there we go. That's Gauntlet 7 Stars 1PMC. I've done some runs where I do a hand cam. I like doing that on stream, and I will always do that upon request if anyone ever wants to see it, because I absolutely love showing this run off. So, if anyone's ever in stream wants to see the hand cam, I also have, I think the current record is also with hand cam, so you can see how all the tricks work. I make videos on my YouTube explaining how to do some of them, and I'm working on a whole series of tutorials on our 1PMC tricks. This run was largely pulled together by the efforts of me, Bluescreen, and Boyo. The 3 current active Gauntlet 7 Stars runners. We actually have a couple other people that are interested in trying out the run. Recently, Pote had a revival. He had kind of disappeared from the speedrunning scene and was, for the longest time, the world record holder for this game. He actually came back and started watching our streams, and he said he's going to start running the game again. So that's super exciting to see. We've really revived this game, this category, and all of the innovations we found and the love that we've been pouring into Seven Sorrows has completely revived the game. And so for a game that was kind of the unfortunate, odd one out in the Gauntlet series that a lot of people considered to be the death of the Gauntlet IP, it's great to see it find its own home, its own niche in a speedrunning community. And a lot of that is, unfortunately, it is due to how short the development cycle was. It allowed for a lot of really cool exploits and glitches. So, huge shout out to Blue Screen for finding a lot of these tricks. Huge shout out to Boyo. Boyo is sort of the main pillar in the Gauntlet community. He really, really puts a lot of love into the whole series. He holds a lot of the records for all the other games. And he's been incredibly welcoming to people like me who are new to the Gauntlet series and new to the Gauntlet community. And he's been running it alongside, he's been running Seven Sorrows alongside us, and it's been an incredible time. We've been doing co-op runs, we've been doing races with each other. It's been a lot of fun, and it's so cool to see a renaissance for such a neglected speed game. A game that used to take over an hour now is under 40 minutes, and we average a low 40. That's an incredible accomplishment for us, and I think we're all very proud of it and very happy with where it's gone. So that's Gauntlet 1PMC. I think it's an awesome run. I think it's an awesome showcase. It's super fun to see the 4-controller stuff. I do it on a desk. I have a TV tray that I can bring anywhere to do it there. I can also put the controllers on my lap the way that Boyo does, and you can just do it on your legs. It's been a wild ride trying to figure out how to do something that should take 4 hands but with only 2. So to whoever does end up seeing this, I thank you for watching it. I thank you for spending a little bit of time with Gauntlet 7 Sorrows and the Gauntlet community. This is a game that means a lot to me, so I've had a really great time with this. So yeah, thank you.